everyone, welcome to the BPD Bunch. I'm your host, Xannie, and today I'm here with Katja and special guests, Kylee and Jake. We're wrapping up this week's conversation all about living with more than one personality disorder. If this or other PD-related topics interest you, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you do not miss anything. Now, I do highly recommend watching the other 2 episodes in this series. They are linked down below. But in case you are just joining this conversation, for context, each of the people here for this conversation, excluding myself, have been diagnosed with BPD and another personality disorder. So for Katja, her other diagnosis is schizotypical personality disorder. For Kylee, it's narcissistic personality disorder. And for Jake, it's antisocial personality disorder. So to wrap up this topic, I wanted to ask y'all about some of your relationship stories. Can you share a story about a relationship that significantly impacted your understanding of your personality disorder diagnoses?
A few years ago, I dated someone with diagnosed MPD, and I didn't know much about the disorder then. I only had my BPD diagnosis, and it was an awful relationship, and it was the one that made me go to therapy and eventually get my MPD diagnosis in the first place. But before that relationship, I treated people like crap. I was awful. I was manipulative. I was cruel, vindictive. And that relationship gave me a taste of my own medicine and then some. And it made me realize how I was affecting other people. Because people before then would come to me and be like, you know, I had to go to therapy because of you. You gave me a lot of trauma. And I was like, okay, and like, get over it. And then that relationship, I'm still in therapy 4 years later. And now I get it that it was really damaging, and I was abusive, and I was with someone abusive, and now I know how abuse affects people.
Aside from the relationship I've already mentioned, because that was probably the biggest thing for me, this relationship I've just had, I've had to go into a lot of things like therapy, and I've started to do like something that's spoken a lot about in spirituality, which is called shadow work. Something I've really had to hammer home, journaling, that kind of things, basically writing down what's wrong with me and how I can accept it and move on and, you know, be better, if you like. But another relationship that I had, a previous relationship, which actually was with somebody with borderline personality disorder, that wasn't internalized. So that was explosive, Kylee, to kind of go off the question you had earlier. Very explosive. Me being completely dead emotionally and her being extremely emotional. She was kind of, why aren't you being emotional with me? Why won't you hold my hand? Why won't you kiss me? Why won't you do this? And I was just like, go away, like, get off me. And then eventually we broke down very quickly. Like I turn off from people like instantly if I see something I don't like the bond, if you like, is severed, and it will never be rebuilt. So that's a moment for me where I realized, okay, like what you're dealing with, this inner problem you have, is going to keep coming up in relationships if you don't deal with it, if you don't, learn how to communicate effectively with the other person. Because I walked away from that person, and that person, like, tried to keep me in the house when I was trying to leave, like physically, locking the doors and things like that. And it was getting bad. So I was thinking, I can't be in this position again, for me and for the other person.
I have a question about ASPD. So I know with MPD, there is a sensitivity to criticism where you have to always feel right. Do you have that in like arguments where like you need to like protect your ego, like feel like you are right and like get your point across with your ASPD?
Yes. For me, it's mainly a trauma response, and I suppose it's all a trauma response, but in the sense like, the things that I've been through when I was younger, a lot of it was about a lack of control. I was always the one who was, being abused or whatever. So I think as I've grown up, I've had a really stark and sharp reaction to people trying to undermine me. So yeah, that's like a big trigger for me, I think. Yeah.
It's so funny because I can totally relate, and I only have a BPD diagnosis. So I'm like,
there's a lot of crossover.
I feel that, yeah.
I think when I reflect on all of my relationships in the past, like the one thing that really stands out is the fact that I feel a large part of the reason, if not the main reason altogether, that they failed was because I was so intent on masking. I think especially when you have 2 separate disorders, I didn't want to give anything away. Like, I always had an idea that there was something not quite right. Like, I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I knew that it was different to the people around me. And I was absolutely determined that nobody was ever going to find out that there was something wrong with me. And what I did was kind of overcompensate in a lot of ways, and it just ended up being performative. I just felt like I was acting. And then that affected how the other person saw me, because they got a completely different perception of me than how I actually was, because I was so determined to hide who I actually was, because I think maybe I was scared of the rejection, or scared that, you know, that they would think less of me. So I really did try hard to hide it. And it's actually probably only in my current relationship where I have felt comfortable enough to unmask and to let somebody experience the real me. And luckily I haven't been rejected because of it, like quite the opposite. But I do feel like it was such a big risk for me to do that when I was younger, I just didn't feel safe enough to be able to do it. And that wasn't a reflection on the other person. That was me. And I think, especially with the social withdrawal aspect of it as well, it created a lot of pressure on the other person, because I do sort of have like one person in my life that I tend to keep quite close, because I struggle with social relationships with other people, and that person tended to be my partner. And that's a lot to rely on somebody for so much in your life. And I think that overall, it was just this desperation to hide who I was that wrecked so many of my relationships.
Well, thank you for sharing those stories to wrap up our discussion on living with more than one personality disorder. Kylee, Jake, can you share with our audience where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Kylee Rackam. And on Instagram, it's Kylee Rackam with an underscore at the end.
For me, it's primarily just Instagram, and it's just Antisocial Theatre, all lowercase.
Thank you again, Kylee, Jake, for joining us. This was a really great series of episodes. Thank you to our audience so much for watching. We hope you got a nugget of wisdom to take with you on your journey. We're going to be back on Wednesday with a brand new topic, so we will see you next time.